What do you mean you don't have hot sauce? This is Texas. We put Tabasco on cornflakes. You can play it safe if you want to, but you got to risk it to get that biscuit. When it comes to business, you got to look out for the cookout. That's how we do it in Texas. What do you mean my accent is too southern? Well, we're fixing to get it on Solve for X. Welcome to Solve for X, the podcast where curiosity meets collaboration. I'm Dr. Rick Fernandez, your host on this journey into the heart of education and innovation. Welcome back to another episode of Solve for X, where we're talking with K12 technology, industry, and business to get a little bit of understanding of how the K12 space works. I'm your host, Dr. Rick Fernandez. I have a special guest. He's not been a part of the show just yet, but I've known David Sturtz from Woolpert for quite some time. Now, David is the K12 Program Director for Woolpert. And David, first, welcome to the show, and thank you for taking the invitation. Could you share a little bit about Woolpert and your role with the company?
Yeah, thanks, Rick. Good to reconnect with you. A little bit about Woolpert. We are a global architecture, engineering, and geospatial group. So I work in one small slice of that pie in our K12 market. And the work that our team does is everything leading up to and supporting design through program management. So all your data assessments, your demography, your housing studies, your building conditions, capacities, adequacies, and then going into, now that you have all of this data, how do you put together a coherent plan, which is where we connected a few years ago at this phase. Creating a master plan that usually informs bond asks and your major capital investments and strategies, helping that communicate that need and work with the community to craft the plan, and then getting into the design team. We have our architect and design team that can take it into standard specs and all the way through design, and then our program management team that helps you button it up and get the project done. So that's our sort of life cycle: assess, plan, design, build.
You know, I've got to ask, and when I remember meeting you, how passionate you were about K12, and I think that's a little rare. I know everyone says they're passionate, but just your in-depth knowledge with how you support schools, and you knew a lot of the pain points. How did you get into this? Like, why this work? Why K12? That sometimes can be problematic, can have its own barriers to get in there and get some work done.
Well, no 11-year-old kid lies in bed dreaming of becoming a K-12 facility planner when they grow up. But I came from a family of educators, like many of us who find ourselves in this business. Mom was an English teacher. Her sister's an English teacher. Her brother was a journalist. The whole 9 yards. So you're kind of steeped in it. And then went to college and met a girl who decided that she wanted to go teach at this missionary school in Bolivia. And I said, I want to be a missionary teacher in Bolivia. Sure. So I chased her down. It worked out. We have 5 kids. It worked 20 some odd years later. But I taught down in South America for a year and then came back. And long story short, after a master's program, ended up getting into a startup for a tutoring company. So we were working one-on-one with kids, reading, writing, arithmetic, the whole 9 yards. But this was during the NCLB days. Would you remember the adequate yearly progress, which, very few could make AYP if you had, populations that, started behind. It was hard to catch up on AYP, which is why the whole thing ultimately needed to be scrapped. But during that time, I was a supplemental educational service provider. So I got into working with about two dozen different districts in my state where I live, Ohio, as well as in Florida, where we were providing that one-on-one tutoring. So a lot of times I had 140, 150 teachers doing part-time tutoring. So I got a lot of secondhand knowledge and feedback about what teachers were dealing with going into the homes one-on-one with kids. But then every year I would get an overflow of students because some provider would go out of business or get kicked out of business. And then we would take over and I couldn't hire fast enough. So every year I teach a half a dozen to a dozen kids myself on top of doing the business. So it was quite a sprint for that 6-7 years that I was in the thick of it. But it really hit me, close to home, pun intended, going in their homes to see the sum of the need. Like there's a lot that these kids were behind that they could catch up, and my 24 to 40 hours of one-on-one instruction that I was able to provide them, I could see the growth, but realizing, man, we need to do this 3, 4, 5 times over to get up to grade level.
Right.
And so when Arnie Duncan sort of sunsetted that back in 2012 as Secretary of Ed, at that same time, I had a friend who ran what was called DeYoung Richter at the time, which is the parent company that that ultimately became Cooperative Strategies, that became part of Woolpert. So Tracy Richter was CEO of that, and he and I went running together a few times and started talking shop. And he was doing this pre-bond programming, the master planning, and the demography, and all that. And invited me in when he had an opening, and sort of so I went from one-on-one tutoring and seeing that need to now doing large-scale capital planning and learning that ropes. And what I've seen since doing this since 2012 is we might be doing a facility master plan for a bond, but we are either setting the table for the district to be able to afford more resources for their kids day to day, or we're setting the table for them to be spread so thin that they cannot provide adequate resources to their kids day to day. So I've kind of seen this as, all through the lens of where I was in my first life, working with those kids one-on-one, and saying, ultimately, how do we maximize the potential resources directly to the student's benefit?
Wow. Okay. That's a lot to unpack there. With that in mind, you've got some very unique experience. In Texas, we are seeing, and I have a lot of friends going through this consolidation process, right? Where enrollment has stalled, or students have left, or never came back from COVID, you name it. We don't have the funding mechanisms to recoup that. And then so you're finding a lot of school buildings way under capacity, and multiple buildings within a district. That's just really causing districts to hemorrhage money. Are you seeing the same things, not only in Texas, but nationally? And can give some perspective on maybe how some of the districts are starting to work through that, navigate it, at least ask questions of how might we do this?
Yeah, I mean, it is absolutely a national phenomenon, and COVID has a role. School choice has a role. Lowering birth rates has a role. Cities that have built out and no longer have big farmlands to build 500 single-family homes has a role. So you kind of, you have all of these factors demographically and otherwise that have caused a lot of districts to have flat to declining enrollment. Meanwhile, in the past 15 years that I've been more intently in this business, seeing that the demands per student are going up while that revenue is going down, because the revenue is tied to the student, as you alluded to. So yeah, there is a bubble that is growing beneath us and starting to pop in some cities, and it's going to, I think, define the next 20 years of school operations in many ways, with the central question being, how do you reshape yourself as an operation to invest more in your kids without driving families away on the one hand, or on the other hand, clinging to too much overhead and slowly eroding the resources that you're providing to kids and slowly push families away. Like there is a need for a rethinking and a budgeting and a reimagining and visioning and all of that comes with it to how many schools do I operate, how close to my students, in what configurations, in what conditions. And the general response initially that I've seen in the marketplace is concern, followed by, well, let's try to offer more choices because we think families might be choicing out. So let's have programs. But it becomes a challenge when you're trying to offer more and more programs. Meanwhile, your revenue is going down, your expenses are actually more programs you offer, more expenses go up per capita while your revenue goes down. If you're not doing those programs at a high level of fidelity and resource, it's not really a program. It's more of it can be a marketing tool sometimes more than a substantive program if districts aren't careful.
Let me throw this in because you're saying a bunch of things that are like right in the forefront of what we're dealing with here in Texas. If a district is going through this process, what are they most likely to get wrong out of the gate? And the reason I ask that is because there's a lot of consolidation going on, and some of it's attached to an upcoming bond ask or trying to figure out what do we do with our facilities. So there's a lot of uncertainty just in the normal process of growth, bond. What are they getting wrong right out of the gate, if anything?
The number one thing that I've seen in doing a lot of community engagements in districts, so done probably 230 some odd community meetings since 2012 around facilities and planning. And what everybody wants at the core is I want a well-resourced school with caring teachers that's accessible to me in my home. And I want that consistently. Period. Full stop. Like, you can add stuff to that. I'd like dual language fine arts. I'd like to have a STEM program. I'd like, more welding opportunities for my kid when they get into career tech courses in the high school level. There's lots of additional icing on that cake. But the fundamental thing is, you go to Starbucks anywhere and you get the same hot cup of coffee. It tastes very, very similar. And anywhere you go, you can rely on a certain level of quality. You want that for schools. Everybody wants that for schools. The point of that is, you can look at, well, we need to have this innovative program. We need to have this additional carrot. We need to have the additional sport, this additional, extracurricular, this additional curricular program choice option or what have you. All of that can be great, but it's icing. The thing that you fundamentally have to solve for at all times as a district is every school in my division, for every parent, is it a predictably high quality of education K12 for every family. The problem in districts is not finding pockets of things that are going well. It's scaling it so it's the norm for everybody, in my experience. So, where districts get it wrong is we look to the special, the unique, and the different. What we really need to do, in my observation, is look for the predictable level of quality for every kid, every day, no matter where they are in our district.
I've never heard it quite phrased that way. And, that I would say that is definitely, contrary to what I see everybody doing, because we all are scrambling for how do we compete. Now, all of a sudden, we've never really had to be in competition with each other. And they're in a landscape where absolutely they're not only in competition with their neighbor from the public side, but also all the charters, the privates, and what have you. So like you said, everybody's trying to tease out uniqueness within their school district in hopes that it draws some students in or it retains some students or staff or what have you. And you contend that instead of that carrot, ensuring quality across the district, no matter how large, how small, but there's the feeling of, I know when I get Whataburger fries, there's that same quality. And that's why out of all French fries, I'm going to go to Whataburger if I have a choice, because I know it's going to be the same quality no matter which Whataburger I stop at.
And while we're playing with analogies, the you're a coach.
Yeah.
And if you're, you're a football coach, and if you work on, a special option where, you're trying to do something unique and you're passing the ball back and forth and you're doing this crazy distraction play, that's really cool, but you can't run up the middle.
Yeah.
You might have a good play every now and then, but you're not consistently moving the ball forward. And with K12, it's that every day I'm showing up, and my kid consistently has caring teachers, competent teachers. The facility is comfortable, safe, and dry, and accessible. And on the net, I'm happy every day. My kid is getting what he or she needs. Boom. That's it. That's the ball game. On top of that, we can add, Mandarin immersion. And on top of that, we can add, language immersion, and we can add STEM, this or that or the other. That's awesome. That is really good. And that should be there. We should have that extra, but not at the expense of focusing on the day-to-day basics.
What do you think that the great districts are doing? What do you see the districts that you love to work with that understand, even though they're going through some type of consolidation process, which is never comfortable, rezoning, all that stuff? What are they getting right? What do you see the great districts doing within this process?
Equity in practice is the short answer. There's a lot of talk about equity in theory. We need equity, equity, equity. Okay, well, but put a number to equity, put a strategy to equity, and then execute that strategy. For example, one of my Texas clients I've done a couple bond programs with is Arlington ISD. And in 2013, we go and it's like, hey, you have a surplus of junior high capacity. You have an imbalance in elementary capacity, and you need more high school capacity. Well, you also, in the community meetings, there's a real demand, both in the community and the business community, for more high-skilled trades. So that initial plan, then that's not even to talk about the fact that they're just wholesale condition needs at the buildings,
right?
And you had a program that they were really excited about. It had great depth of talent in the teaching pool and culture around music and the fine arts, but at the time, it was 73, if I remember correct, % free and reduced lunch population. So there was a real barrier to access the music program, where you had a lot of great culture and opportunity. So the bond program shaped it. It was like, look, you have a junior high school that's in the worst condition in the entire district, and it's right where the highest density of your population lives across the entire district, looking at geospatial mapping of demographics. So knock down that junior high, put an addition on the adjacent one that's a mile away, mile and a half, something like that, and you combine it to a right-sized junior high school, and you replace that old school junior high school with a new career tech high school that's shared by all districts, and then all the 6 high schools, and that high school is focused on 11th and 12th grade level programs that all 6 schools have their 9th and 10th grade feeders into. So changing the curriculum, the program there for career tech, so that you're adding capacity that you need for the high school, but it's benefiting every kid. You're providing a systematic feeder for all of your K-12 education, where every high school has the basic 100 and 200 level classes at the 9th and 10th grade. And then you can get the really skilled welder in the fire department. They're teaching the fire, getting kids ready to be medics and firefighters, and cosmetology and all the stuff, nursing programs. You could pay people, a few really high talent people, to serve every high school. Every community can benefit from this one resource because it's shared smack dab in the middle. Mm-hmm. And it solves a capacity need, and it solves a program desire, but it does so in a comprehensive district with a comprehensive district strategy that checks multiple boxes. We had condition needs at the junior high, surplus capacity at the junior high, deficit of capacity at the high school, demand for high school programming, and solve all of those things that benefit every kid. Like, that's one aspect of the plan where you can take a facility plan and set the table for actual equity in a day-to-day experience for kids, as opposed to the easy button, which would have been, well, let's just add, a couple programs, high career tech programs at all the high schools and put little additions on them. Well, you could never have the same level of quality investment in 6 mini programs that you could in one shared program.
Yeah.
Plus, you're just cobbling together additional additions on buildings that already are squeezed on their hallways and cafeteria size and library size. You're just squeezing that further by adding more student capacity without expanding the core. So, the easy answers have often been, well, to be equitable, we need to have it everywhere. Think about how you can do high concentrations of equity, type investments that serve everybody. And that might not be having it at every school.
You bring up a great point. And, my argument against that has always been, okay, well, now we've got to worry about the transportation to and from. Is that going to cancel out some of the students? But I never considered the component of, number one, what you just expressed, the equity of access related to the district needs and
right.
the location of a standalone that everybody has access to. And I really didn't consider, in terms of FTEs, those CTE programs are not easy to staff. And so now I've just created a bunch of programs that multiple layers of staffing for the same position that's already difficult. And if I can reduce that, it's not as costly in terms of staff, and it's not as difficult to staff for my kids. So that's a great point that I've really never looked at from that lens. What are some of the coolest things? Give me one or two things that may not have yet to be executed, but at least have been on the table or currently on the table that you feel comfortable sharing from some of your work. Like, they're innovative. We're not going to do this. We've never done this. We have to try something that's totally out of the K-12 box. Anything come to mind from the projects you're working on?
Well, I mean, I'll pick up from where the story just said. I'm really proud of that work in Arlington. Yeah. For example, I know that program, that idea of checking multiple boxes, that school was open with 1,500 capacity, if memory serves right, open in 2019, and the first day it was full.
Wow.
And it was so popular, has been so popular, that we planned for the possibility of an addition of 200 students with additional programs. And that went forward in our 2019 follow-up master plan and follow-up bond that funded it. So that is in process. So very proud of that one there in Texas, where in that program, for example, the music, part of the bond in 2013 was to buy instruments for the entire division, fire district. Well, gosh, you're buying a bunch of instruments, saxophones and clarinets and horns on a bond money. How are you going to keep that up, that you're using a debt instrument to buy, instruments? Well, you retire that debt early over the life cycle of the instruments. And then in that career tech program, we built a room, and they staff a program for instrument repair. So the students have an instrument repair technician that teaches them, and they work on their own instruments. So the bond program seeded this program to keep up. So connecting all of the dots long-term investment for one-time investment programs. Super proud of that. And that's the Dan Dyker Career Tech Center in Arlington. If you get a chance, Ginger Polster's the director there, and she'd love to give you a tour.
I'd love to go. I mean, because I didn't know. I knew Arlington had some great systems, some great programs, but not to the extent. So yes, I'll definitely want to do that.
So that's one that's been in the rearview mirror. Right now, I'm working in the past couple of years, worked with several clients. One this week, I'm just won't reveal the district right now, but working with that board just this week to finalize a plan, help them finalize a plan that actually is going to reduce about 20% of their portfolio, which is a really big deal. It is not easy.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
It is not easy stuff. But the board members, one of them in particular, said in the meeting, we've been going through this for a while, this process flow for a while. And, she said, this is hard, but I'm beginning to be excited for what it could do and what it could mean for our kids. Because what we're looking at, the whole process is, you've been stretched too thin for way too long. You've nearly doubled the expense per pupil in the last 10 years, and it's still not enough. And the population's just declining. It's built out. Population's declining. Several hundred students every single year. 600 down this year from last. It's hard. Doing nothing is a surefire way to continued inequities. And so I'm proud of doing the hard work that's still in process, being a part of that, where the administration is actively working on accounting for where the savings can be identified and reinvested in what is actually moving the needle for kids. So it is, as I told them, this board in a summer workshop, there is a desperate need for some districts to work with their cities to provide a model for how to reinvent yourself in your portfolio in a way that improves the educational experience and outcomes for kids. There's a desperate need for that.
No doubt.
There needs to be leadership in this area. So, ongoing process there. We did a project that's completed, a master plan in Fargo, North Dakota. And for them, we found out, hey, they hadn't passed a bond since, it's been decades. And they had about $500 million in deferred maintenance. And, it was a couple dozen schools in the district. And you are looking at, they have half a dozen elementary schools with, enrollments in the 200s, looking to decline on that over time. And many of those schools are really close together. And so how do you provide equity in access in high quality education and high resource education and a warm, safe, cool, dry, and adequate facility with those ingredients? Well, the plan called for example, combining a K2 and a 3-5 school that are 0.6 miles away onto one rebuild K5, because they both needed major work, but they serve the same population and they're a hop, skip, and a jump away. So you rebuild one school that you can actually afford to staff at a good FTE per student ratio to meet all the needs, because you can't as you spread yourself so thin. And that's, the little case studies like that. And they've RFP'd for the first project, and they're starting down the road. Even before they go out for a bond, they're starting with their available funds to get started on reshaping their district for the long-term investments in their kids. So it's those things that excited about is a sober assessment of the facts, a commitment to equity in practice, not just in words, and then putting together plans that really need your community's involvement to understand. And I'll maybe pivot a little. Maybe we can talk a little bit about community engagement, because another thing that districts need to get right is to strategically engage their community as partners in this plan, not just fear their responses to your plan, but engage them in helping to craft it.
Yeah, that's always a challenge, because you're just always unsure of how people will swallow, especially when you're talking consolidation. You're swallowing bad news, right? I mean, it's their neighborhood school. It's a program that they love. It's a district getting smaller. Sometimes it's teachers no longer having a job in the district because of consolidation. So that is a huge need in terms of school district support, and really, as I get to spend a lot of time with the next generation of superintendents, that's a blind spot, because most of the community engagement has been on the ask for new stuff because we're growing, and you lean into the excitement of it. And as long as you manage it right, for the most part, Texas does a good job of passing bonds. And
Right.
now we're seeing that shift, like you said, that bubble kind of burst, where more often than not, we're having to deliver bad news and lesser of evils of choices. From the perception side, may not necessarily, we may be able to do things better and more efficient, but just from the perception side, it's usually a lesser of evils type choice. From the community engagement side, give us one thing, like, if you do nothing else as a district, do this.
Number one thing is lay out the hard data that you have to work with. Budget deficits, if they exist, spending per student, teacher vacancies, building conditions, enrollments, capacities, and the differences that have occurred in those data points in the last 10 years. If you paint the picture of your operational reality and financial reality with the real numbers, and then communicate that, educate. We're in the business of education. It's educating the community. Hey, here's the stuff that we have to wrestle with over here. Our commitment is to a world-class education for every kid every day that's accessible to every family. That's our commitment. These are the pain points that are really preventing us from doing that to the level that we want. And here's the trend lines. Mm-hmm. So we want to go over here. We want this. Here's what we have to deal with. Broadly speaking, here's our strategies to get there. Sit tight and hope all the kids, family, and money come back. Option A. Option B, start to remake our operations. And for districts that are declining in enrollment to a significant degree and have their costs increasing to a degree, and they haven't been able to bond sufficiently to keep up with their buildings' deferred maintenance and needs. The general rule of thumb is newer and fewer and closer. Newer schools, fewer schools, closer to where the population is, because populations move and buildings don't over time. So that's number one. On top of that, if you have 6 to 6 months at least, was ideal, you organize a committee, 20, 40, 60 people, through an application for those who are interested in being co-creators of this plan with you. And you vet for experience. Ask questions like, how are you willing and able to work with peers who have different opinions than you in a productive manner? Yeah. Tell me your experience in data analysis and so forth. So you have a rigorous application and a process, and invite your community volunteers to be a part of it. And when you get highly qualified, highly motivated, representative folks from your community, and you give them the data and say, here's our azimuth, here's our data, help us chart options from A to B. They'll do it, and they'll do it well, and then they help own it.
I love it. I love it. I know I've kept you longer than I meant to. I need you to brag a little bit on yourself and on Woolpert. So obviously there's a lot of options when districts are going through this work. I mean,
right.
We've worked with a bunch of friends in different places, different companies, what have you. What's the difference? What do I get if David is my program manager for this incredibly complex and probably difficult consolidation or project? What's the differentiator?
Well, I'm going to answer it this way: is if you're a district leader, COO, CFO, superintendent, you're looking to go and you need to do a difficult facility plan. Make sure it's not driven with an architectural lens. Make sure it's driven with a programming and finance lens. You are trying to maximize your investment for every student every day. We are not trying to build an award-winning design for some students every day. And there is a real push in this industry. It's dominated by architects who have an incentive to recommend to you, hey, you should really build this award-winning design school for this one community over here because that's all you can afford. You can't do it for every community, but you can do it for this community, and here's the need. So let's start plucking down your $700 million in program. I know you can only spend $100 million in the next 5 years, but let's spend it all on this school. Then it'll be amazing. Think strategically and get a strategic partner with you that is not dominantly concerned with getting a design contract, but is dominantly concerned with helping you set the table for equitable investments for your kids for the next 50 to 100 years. That will have its design elements, but it is not driven by design.
So to the audience out there, what he's saying is you need somebody that you can trust that's going to have the district interest, the student interest, the community interest in the forefront of the process, the advisement, the community, the stakeholder, all of that stuff. You have to have the right people to help guide that in the best interest of students. And
right.
not all firms do that because they are for profit, and I understand that and have great friends everywhere. But I would say that the reason that you called David, because if you can't tell his passion for education and educators, then you're missing out there. But you got to have somebody you can trust that's not going to be worried about, well, if we tack on $2 more million, $3 more million for a suspension bridge, I don't even know what that is, but just throw that out there, that it benefits them, but you don't need that. You've got other issues and you can do some things just by having the right partner. So I know you didn't want to brag on yourself, but I will definitely brag on you. And if you're a Woolpert, then I'm behind Woolpert because I want people that my friends can trust, and I want to be able to recommend companies and more so people that can be trusted, especially in this difficult time that educators are in right now. So, thank you for your time today. We've got to continue the conversation, and I want to pick your brain on some other things that we're going through here in Texas. But I know we're at time. So Dave, I appreciate so much. Thank you to Woolpert for allowing you to jump on with me and spend a little time. And if you like what you heard and saw, subscribe, like, share with your friends, and we will see you next time on Solve for X.
Thanks, Rick.
Thanks for joining us on Solve for X. Please follow, like, and subscribe for more episodes. And until next time, keep asking the right questions and solving for X.